She's too ugly for her husband to love her, my boss said, waving his glass in my direction. He said this in front of all our colleagues at the table. That's why she got divorced. Look at her. The room immediately went silent. About 20 people were sitting at the table. No one knew where to look. I felt hot and ashamed. I worked for this company for 5 years. And this is what he did to me after my difficult divorce. At that moment, the door opened. A tall, handsome man in an expensive suit walked in. He came up to me, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "Sorry, beautiful, that I'm late." My boss choked on his wine. He clearly didn't expect this. Sometimes the universe intervenes at just the right moment. My name is Nane Everett. And before I tell you how I ruined the career of the man who tried to ruin mine, I want you to understand something. This isn't just a story of revenge. It's a story about taking back your power when someone tries to humiliate you. If you've ever been bullied, underestimated, or rejected, listen to the end. This story may give you the courage to stand up for yourself. That evening at Castellan's restaurant, we were supposed to celebrate the success of our department. Instead, the evening turned into a disgrace for me. My boss, Terrence Fowler, was always tough behind closed doors, but this time he decided to humiliate me in front of everyone. He knew that I had recently gotten a divorce just 3 weeks ago after finding out that my husband, Pre-Stan, had been cheating on me for 2 years with my best friend. I was still hurt, and Terrence knew it. When that handsome man kissed me and sat down next to me, I was as surprised as everyone else. I immediately realized who Anela Walsh, the director of Hernovations, was. Our firm really wanted to work with them. "Here," he said warmly. "I saw you from afar and couldn't resist coming over." Our conversation at the conference last month was the highlight of that evening. The smug look on Terrence's face immediately disappeared. "Smile." He looked startled. Wine dripped from his chin. "Mr. Walsh," he muttered, standing up. "One unexpected meeting." But Ellie didn't even look at him. He was looking only at me. "I've read your proposal. It's perfect for us. Perhaps we can discuss it over lunch next week?" Everyone at the table was silent. I felt the first real smile in weeks appear on my face. "I'd love to," I replied. That evening changed everything. When I returned home to my empty apartment, I didn't cry like I used to. I started planning. I joined Palmer Technology 5 years ago. Through hard work, I rose from a junior analyst to a senior project manager. My marriage had been unhappy for a long time, long before I found out about the infidelity. I put all my pain from the divorce into my work and exceeded all the targets. 3 months ago, a director position opened up, and I was perfect. I made a big presentation with ideas on how to develop our department. I had excellent reviews for 5 years. But then Terrence said with a smirk, "You don't have the toughness it takes to be a manager." And he gave the job to Bryson, a guy who had worked there half as long as me. I even often corrected his reports. No one knew, not even my close colleagues Valencia and Dexter, what happened at last year's New Year's party. Then a drunk Terrence cornered me and started behaving too intrusively. I immediately made it clear that this was unacceptable. Something cold appeared in his gaze. He whispered, "Be careful, Nan. Here, I decide who will be successful." After I was passed over for a promotion, I started recording everything. Every inappropriate comment, every time a woman's idea was ignored, only to be later suggested by a man and praised. I wrote it all down in a secure document. Every day, I also noticed oddities in finances, reporting errors, inflated bills, suspicious expenses, and missing equipment. I kept quiet, but I kept meticulous records. The morning after that dinner, I came into work and saw a message from Valencia. She suggested meeting for coffee. We were never close outside the office, but we always communicated well. As we sat down at a cafe near work, she said, "What happened yesterday was too much. And this isn't the first time." She put the phone on the table. There was a recording. Terrence had appropriated her marketing strategy at the meeting, the one he had previously called overly ambitious. "I'm not the only one," she said quietly. Towards the end of the day, 2 more people approached me. Dexter brought documents. Terrence had stolen his client management method and passed it off as his own. Lumi from accounting had also noticed financial errors, even more than I had. I suggested meeting not just to complain, but to think together about what to do. On Saturday, we gathered at my home. I made coffee while everyone sat around the kitchen table. The tension in the room was palpable. Before we begin, I said, I want you to understand that we're not just talking about personal grievances. We're talking about serious violations that are damaging the company, clients, and our careers. I showed them my notes, clear, unemotional, factual. The others shared theirs too. By the evening, we had a complete picture of who Terrence really is. Terrence had built his career by appropriating other people's ideas, falsifying numbers, and hindering women and minorities from advancing. Dexter reminded him that there was a board meeting in 2 weeks. Valencia added that Terrence would be the one reporting on the department's successes. He would likely claim credit for bringing in the Ryan Innovations client. He had already started telling everyone that he deserved the credit. I sensed a clear plan beginning to emerge, not one based on emotion, but on precise, verified facts. Here's what we'll do, I said. The next 2 weeks were intense. We continued to gather evidence while still doing our regular work. I texted Elliot Walsh and simply asked if he could join the board meeting video call to discuss the project. The day arrived. Terrence walked into the room in an expensive suit, confident and pleased with himself. He was ready to share how much his department had accomplished. CEO Augustine Perry opened the meeting. When it was Terrence's turn, he launched into a presentation and began to talk about the team's accomplishments. Almost everything he talked about was actually the work of the employees he had suspended or ignored. The highlight of his speech was the news of Center Nation signing a major deal worth millions. He said it was thanks to his hard work and negotiations. In fact, it was I who secured this deal, although other companies had tried for years and failed. I felt Valencia, Dexter, and Lumi tense around me. We understood the moment had come. I raised my hand. Before we continue, I said, I think there has been a misunderstanding regarding the relationship with Hizern Innovations. The room fell silent. Augustine looked surprised, but nodded, giving me the floor. With your permission, I said, I invited the person who can clarify the situation. I opened the laptop, and Elliot Walsh's face appeared on the big screen. Good morning, everyone, he said. Nyan offered me Connect to clarify. Then Elliot told me how we met at a professional conference, how he was interested in my ideas, and that I sent him an offer. He emphasized that he had never met or spoken to Terrence. Terrence's face turned pale. This must be a mistake, he began hastily. I personally oversaw all the negotiations. Interesting, Elliot replied, because Nayan was the only person from your company with whom I communicated. Augustine frowned. He looked at Terrence, then at me. Perhaps I'm misunderstanding something? Terrence asked. Actually, I answered calmly. You're missing a lot. I sent each board member a copy of the report. This isn't a complaint about personal relationships. It's a detailed analysis of how poorly our department has been managed for 2 years. The report lays everything out in its place. Financial mistakes, ignoring talent, taking credit for others' work. Everything with dates, numbers, and evidence. What is this? Terrence raised his voice. This is a witch hunt. Because you're angry about being denied a promotion. I didn't rise to the provocation. I simply nodded to Valencia, and she stood up. I confirmed the section on stolen ideas, she said calmly, and played a recording on her phone of Terrence taking credit for her work. Then Dexter spoke. He presented his evidence. After him, she showed Lumi an analysis with financial figures. I remained calm. It was all about facts, not about feelings. It wasn't about my humiliation at dinners, not about my denial of a promotion. It was about violations that were causing the company to lose money, customers, and valuable employees. The board members exchanged glances. Augustine's face grew increasingly serious. These are serious allegations, he finally said. Terrence, what do you have to say? Terrence's confidence began to fade. He muttered, It's all planned. They conspired. They are friends. They just don't like that I demand too much from them. The numbers speak for themselves, I answered calmly. We also have many more examples that we didn't include in the report, but can provide them if needed. Augustine asked everyone except the council members to leave the room. As the door closed behind us, we heard Terrence begin to loudly justify himself and then be abruptly interrupted by the director's voice. In the hallway, Valencia took my hand. Whatever happened, she whispered, you did everything you could. We all did. 30 minutes passed in tense silence. Then Augustine's assistant appeared and called me back alone. When I entered the hall, the air was heavy. Terrence was no longer there. Augustine and the rest of the council members sat with serious faces. "Sit down, Nyan," said Augustine, pointing to a chair. And from that moment on, everything changed. They started asking dozens of questions. "How long have you known about these problems? Why didn't you report earlier? How did you manage to reach an agreement with Kreisern while still working on your main job?" I answered honestly. I explained how I tried to resolve everything according to the rules, but they ignored me. How I was afraid of the consequences if I spoke out alone. How I built connections in my free time because I believed in the company. "And what happened at that dinner?" asked one of the council members. Mr. Walsh mentioned that he intervened when the situation got bad. I was silent for a second. This is where personal and work intersected. "Terrence publicly ridiculed my divorce," I said calmly. Mr. Walsh happened to be nearby and came over to say hello. It was just a coincidence. The board members exchanged glances. Then one of them said, "We're going to put Terrence on administrative leave until a full investigation is completed." Augustine nodded and added, "From what we saw today, everything will most likely confirm your report." He was silent for a moment, then looked at me. "We need an interim head of the department. Are you willing to take this position and be considered for permanent appointment?" It was as if the world had stopped. 5 years of work, months of evidence gathering, weeks of planning. Everything had led to this moment. "I would like to," I answered calmly, although my heart was pounding. As I was leaving the hall, I saw security escorting Terrence to his office to collect his things. We met eyes, and I understood. What destroyed him most was not the fact that he lost his job, but the fact that I won not with shouting, not with resentment, but calmly, with facts like a true leader. The one he pretended to be, but was not. That evening I returned home, poured myself a glass of wine. A message came from Elliot Walsh. Dinner next week to discuss the details. As colleagues, of course. I smiled. The future now seemed full of new possibilities that I had not even dreamed of a month ago. But sitting alone in my living room, I realized this is not the end of the story. This is only the beginning, because what I found in the reports was more than just Terrence's mistake. These problems ran deeper. They affected the entire senior management team. And now, I was in the perfect position to continue the investigation. The next morning, I walked into the office as the interim head of the department. The atmosphere immediately felt different. People looked at me with curiosity. Some whispered, others simply remained silent. But there were also genuine smiles from those who had personally witnessed Terrence's behavior. Valencia was waiting for me at the door of my new office. "Congratulations," she said. There was a mixture of pride and concern in her gaze. "Are you ready?" "More than," I replied, placing my bag on the table that had been Terrence's table just yesterday. But I knew now was not the time to just rejoice. I scheduled meetings with each employee. Not to punish, but to listen to what is stopping them from working, what ideas have been unfairly rejected, what they need to be successful. What I heard confirmed my suspicions. Terrence wasn't the only one who engaged in bullying and manipulation. He was supported and even encouraged by his superiors. They found it convenient that he worked this way. A week had passed since I had become interim manager, and Augustine called me into his office. His assistant Ivy smiled tightly as she saw me out. "And Ellen," said Augustine, without getting up from the large table. "Please have a seat. How did you get settled?" "Very well, thank you," I replied, noticing that he looked tense. The team showed amazing resilience. Okay, he muttered and began shuffling papers without looking me in the eye. "I like to talk about quarterly reports. The council is concerned about the discrepancies you have pointed out." "I'm doing just that right now," I replied. "In fact, I have already studied the old reports in detail." Something flashed across Augustine's face. Very quickly, but I realized it was fear. "There's no need for that," he said sharply. "The board of directors approved the external audit. It's better to focus on the future rather than dwell on the past." "Of course," I answered calmly, although I understood that only by knowing the past could I avoid new mistakes. Augustine leaned forward. "I'll be honest, Nan. Terrence had powerful enemies. Your appointment is an opportunity to start over. I wouldn't want you to inherit his problems." It sounded like a threat. Not direct, but clear. I kept myself in hand, even though everything was spinning in my head. It wasn't just about protecting the company. Augustine was afraid that I would find even more. Thank you for your concern, I said, standing up. My goal is the success of the department. As I was about to leave, he added, the external audit will begin on Monday. They will need full access to the financial documents. Of course, I nodded. Transparency is the key. As soon as I left his office, I immediately wrote to Lumi. We need to talk outside the office. That same evening we met, me, Lumi, Valencia, and Dexter in a small diner 20 minutes from the office. We ate greasy fries, drank coffee, and I told them what Augustine had said. He's scared, Lumi said. Her accounting mind immediately understood what was what, and he cannot put pressure on you. The discrepancies you found are a diagram. Someone is withdrawing money through frontmen. It's the same story with client accounts, Dexter added. There are many small overpayments that the client himself will not notice, but in total this adds up to hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. Valencia, who was in charge of marketing, looked worried. Last year, Augustine personally approved a marketing campaign worth hundreds of thousands. She was of little use. When I started asking questions, Terrence told me to leave it. I took out my laptop. The auditors were supposed to arrive on Monday, but by then, all the evidence could have disappeared. We worked all night, collecting reports, verifying transactions, creating a secure digital repository of everything we found. By morning, we had solid evidence. Augustine, at least 2 other executives, have been stealing money from the company for years. They used Terrence, and he helped them voluntarily. This is no longer just pressure at work or taking credit for something that others have done, Dexter said grimly. This is a real crime. What should we do? Valencia asked. Go to the board of directors again. I remembered Augustine's subtle threat to me and shook my head. Not yet. First, we need to figure out who on the board might be involved. The most important thing now is to document everything and make copies. The weekend was spent in a rush. We copied files, took screenshots, saved emails. On Monday morning, the office was tense. The auditors took their places in the conference room. At precisely 10 a.m., Augustine unexpectedly called a general meeting. The entire company gathered in the main presentation area. Augustine took the stage, and his executives stood around like a royal retinue. As you know, we recently had a change in management, he began in a warm, confident voice. During internal audit, we found alarming problems in the project management department. My heart sank. I realized what was happening. This was not a defense after a scandal. This was a preemptive strike. At first, we thought the problem was with one person, but now we see that this is connected to a wider scheme, false reports and data falsification, he continued. External auditors will help get to the bottom of everything. He looked directly at me. In order to conduct the investigation, we are placing all key employees of the project management department on administrative leave. There was a murmur in the room. Valencia grabbed my hand and squeezed it tightly. Even her nails dug into the skin. Dexter's face turned stony. He understood. We are being eliminated. It's just a precaution, said Augustine. No one is officially accused, but that was the accusation. By sending us on leave, he was not giving us access to evidence. Worse, he was portraying us as the culprits, not the ones who reported the truth. When the meeting ended, Augustine came up to me. Security guards were standing nearby. I'm sorry that everything turned out this way. Nayan, he said very quietly, so that only I could hear. We should have looked forward and not delved into the past. I met his gaze. Terrence dug too deep, too. A look of surprise flashed across his face for a second, but he immediately composed himself. We will need your laptop and work phone. They took me to get my personal belongings. As security escorted me to the office, I noticed that the same thing was happening to Valencia, Dexter, and Lumi. We met eyes. No one spoke, but each of us was full of determination. They didn't even know that we had already managed to collect evidence of what they were trying to hide. That same evening we met at my house. We were shocked but determined. They want to frame us, Valencia said, pacing the room. By the time the investigation is over, they'll sweep everything under the rug and plant evidence against us. But not everything, I said, taking the flash drive out of my bag. Remember how I said I needed to go to the bathroom when the guards were leading us? I then hid in my cosmetic bag. The flash drive contained the most important evidence. Documents in which Augustine personally approved suspicious suppliers, emails on how to hide inflated prices, and details of money being transferred to offshore accounts. That's not enough, Dexter said. They might claim we faked it all. Agreed, I nodded. So we need to outsmart them. I told my plan. It started to take shape in my head from the moment I realized the full scale of corruption. We will not appeal to the board of directors. Suddenly, there are their allies there. We won't go to the media. They might distort everything. Instead, we will appeal directly to the company's largest investors and clients, those who truly have power and a stake in the truth. It's risky, Lumi said. What if we are wrong? Even if there is a risk, we have to try, I said firmly. And we have one advantage that they don't expect. Which? Asked Valencia. I smiled for the first time that day. Elliot Tulsh. The next morning I called Elliot, not as a person he liked, but as the head of a company with which he was about to sign a major contract. Nay, he answered warmly. I was just thinking about you. Elliot, I need help. I got straight to the point, and I need to know that I can trust you. He immediately became serious. What's happened? I briefly talked about the fraud we uncovered, about how we were removed, and about how Augustine wants to set us up. He spoke clearly, without emotion, only facts. Send me everything you have, he replied without hesitation. My legal team will review everything today. That's not all, I added. Chrysler is not the only customer who was deceived. I have evidence on at least 11 other major accounts. Elliot was silent for a second. This could be big news for the entire industry, he said. I know. That's why I need your help. I need to contact the other affected clients. They'll listen to you as CEO, and you can convince them to take action. By midday, Elliot confirmed what we already knew. The evidence was serious and convincing. By evening, he had a video call with 4 other directors. Their companies also suffered from inflated prices. At the same time, Dexter got involved with his business connections. He quietly conveyed our findings to the 3 major shareholders, not as a sensation, but as a serious problem that needs to be urgently addressed. For 3 days, we worked in complete silence, gathering allies. Valencia made a clear presentation. All the facts were lined up in order. Alumi prepared financial reports that were understandable even to those who were not familiar with numbers. On the 4th day, Augustine called me. Nathan, he said politely but insincerely. I was hoping we could calmly discuss how to resolve our situation. What do you mean? I asked calmly. A preliminary check has revealed some irregularities in the documents bearing your electronic signature. He continued, his voice now more stern. The company is ready to accept your resignation without investigation. And, of course, with a good severance pay. Here it is, the trap. They started to fabricate evidence against me. A generous offer, I replied, trying to speak evenly. When do I need to respond? By the end of business tomorrow, he said. Believe me, you better agree, otherwise there will be unpleasant consequences. Immediately after the conversation, I called our team. It's all started, I said. They make their move, and we make ours, Dexter replied. The next morning, while Augustine was waiting for me to be fired, a completely different meeting took place. Ellie hosted breakfast in a private room at a hotel in the city center. 5 general directors, 3 major shareholders, and 2 board members were gathered there. There was not a single suspicious person in the proven team. I arrived last. I brought with me the last piece of evidence, Tieran's personal notebook. His assistant secretly gave it to me. She had been observing his rude behavior for many years. The notebook contained notes, conversations with Augustine about who to fire, who to raise prices for, and how to cover their tracks. For 2 hours, I calmly told everything we learned, not as an offended employee, but as a professional who uncovered a serious fraud scheme. When I finished, the room was silent. Finally, Eleanor Harding, the company's largest shareholder, spoke up. I understood everything. We had to act immediately. By noon, the board members called an emergency meeting. At 3 a.m., Augustine received a call demanding that he come to the main office immediately. By 5 a.m., security had escorted him and 2 other executives out of the building. I didn't see it. I was sitting at home with Valencia, Dexter, and Lumi and waiting. At 5:30 a.m., my phone rang. It was Eleanor Harding herself. "Ms. Everett," she said in an official tone, "the board of directors has suspended Augustine Perry, effective immediately. We have also fired Peter Griffith and Wendy Telbet for their roles in the fraud." I closed my eyes for a second and felt an enormous sense of relief. "Thank you for taking this seriously," I replied. "We owe you a debt," I said. "Eleanor, the board also asked me to tell you that all four of you have not only been reinstated in your positions, but will also receive a formal apology. We also want you to continue to lead the department for the time being. We are currently searching for new candidates." She paused. "And also, Ms. Everett, the board hopes that you will apply for a permanent position." I hung up and looked at my friends, the people who had supported me and risked so much. "It's over," I said simply. Valencia shook her head. "This isn't the end, it's just the beginning." And she was right. Within a month, the company had changed dramatically. The audit had expanded to include documents going back 5 years. 3 more executives were fired. Clients who had been overcharged received refunds. And I applied for a permanent position as head of department. I went through 3 rounds of interviews with the new management team, and I was appointed not just a manager, but vice president of operations. Now I was responsible for several departments at once. My first decision: promote Valencia, Dexter, and Lumi so that their work and abilities are recognized and adequately rewarded. Second, implement an anonymous system for reporting ethical issues within the company. 6 months after that dinner, where Terrence humiliated me in front of everyone, I threw a celebration at the same restaurant, this time for our entire department. While everyone was eating and talking, I stood up to offer a toast. "To resilience," I said, raising my glass, "and to the courage to do what's right, even when it's difficult." Across the room, I met Elliot's gaze. He smiled warmly, differently. He was more than just a business partner anymore. We had been dating quietly, without rushing, for a month. We both felt how our working relationship had turned into something personal. Later, as he was driving me home, he asked the question that had been swirling in our heads for a long time. "You could have stopped after you exposed Terrence. Why did you continue and go against Augustine?" I thought about it and answered because real change doesn't happen when one bad person leaves. They start when the system that allowed them to behave that way changes. He nodded thoughtfully. "You know, when I came to that restaurant and saw him talking to you, I never imagined I'd found myself in such a pivotal moment." "Me neither," I admitted. "But I've learned that sometimes the hardest moments in life can lead to the best changes." As we pulled up to my house, I thought about how far I've come. I was once a woman crying alone after a divorce, and now I'm the person who changed not only my life, but an entire company culture. You know what's ironic? I said to Elliot as he walked me to the door. Terrence had been right about one thing that night. I really couldn't save my marriage, but not because I was ugly, but because I was too strong to stay where I wasn't appreciated. Elliot took my hand. "Their loss. Your gain," he said. As I opened the door, my phone vibrated. The news came in. I looked at the screen and smiled. Augustine Perry was just indicted. 37 counts for fraud, theft, and embezzlement. "Justice comes in different forms," I whispered. "Speaking of justice," Elliot said, "did you know Terrence applied for a job at one of my competitors' companies?" Their director called me and asked for a review. "And what did you say?" I asked. Elliot's eyes gleamed. I told the truth. He lacks real leadership. If you've ever been underestimated, hurt, or humiliated, remember, your worth isn't defined by those who don't see it. Sometimes the best revenge isn't to destroy your enemies, but to rise so high that they no longer matter in your life. This journey has taught me that by standing up for yourself, we can inspire others to do the same. If my story resonates with you, please share it with someone it can help. Like and subscribe so you don't miss others. Stories of change and victory. Because together we can create workplaces where talent is noticed, honesty is valued, and no one has to suffer in silence.